There is but one truly serious philosophical problem, and that is suicide. Judging whether life is or is not worth living amounts to answering the fundamental question of philosophy. Quick question. When did you first realize that life doesn't have any inherent meaning? That most human activity is fundamentally pointless? And that everyone around you is just making up purposes to avoid confronting the cosmic indifference of existence? If you've had this realization, you probably thought you were becoming depressed. Your friends and family probably suggested therapy, medication, or positive thinking. Society definitely labeled your newfound clarity as a mental health problem that needed to be fixed. But French philosopher Albert Camus would tell you something that might change your entire perspective. You're not sick. You're awake. What you're experiencing isn't depression. It's the natural human response to seeing reality without the comforting illusions that most people spend their lives maintaining. Right now, you're probably thinking, but surely life has meaning. People find purpose in relationships, careers, causes, religions, personal growth. Just because I can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Here's Camus's brutal insight. You're right that people find these things meaningful, but you're wrong about why. They don't find meaning because it exists independently. They create meaning because the alternative is unbearable. And once you see through the constructed nature of all human meaning, you can't unsee it. Think about the things you used to care deeply about. Career achievements that felt monumentally important. Relationship dramas that consumed your attention. Social causes that fired your passion. Personal goals that drove your daily behavior. Now think about how those same things look when you zoom out to cosmic scale. In a universe that's 13.8 billion years old and contains trillions of galaxies, does your promotion really matter? In the context of geological time, do your relationship problems actually signify anything? From the perspective of universal entropy, do any human achievements create lasting significance? The honest answer is no. And that realization, that everything you and everyone else treats as important is ultimately insignificant, is what Camus called the absurd. You haven't developed a mental illness. You've developed a clear-eyed view of the human condition that most people work very hard to avoid seeing. The depression, emptiness, and nihilistic thoughts aren't symptoms of a broken brain. They're the natural response of a functioning brain that's finally seeing the situation accurately. Most people live their entire lives inside elaborate meaning-making systems that protect them from this recognition. Religion, ideology, materialism, romanticism, careerism, all of these are psychological structures designed to make finite human existence feel infinitely meaningful. But you've seen through these structures. You've recognized them as constructions rather than discoveries. And once you see that all human meaning is invented rather than inherent, everything starts to feel hollow, arbitrary, and pointless. This isn't a bug in your psychological system. It's a feature. You've developed the capacity to see reality without the comforting filters that make life feel automatically meaningful. The problem is that nobody taught you what to do with this capacity once you developed it. Part 2. The absurd condition that defines human existence. Here's something that'll either devastate you or liberate you. Camus identified the absurd as the fundamental condition of human existence, the collision between our need for meaning and the universe's complete indifference to that need. You are a meaning-seeking creature trapped in a meaningless cosmos. You desperately want your life to matter, but you exist in a universe that doesn't care whether you live or die, succeed or fail, love or hate, create or destroy. This isn't a temporary problem that can be solved through better philosophy, more advanced science, or deeper spiritual insight. It's the permanent condition of being human in an indifferent universe. Think about what happens when you try to find ultimate meaning in anything. You pour yourself into a career, only to realize that your industry could disappear tomorrow and nobody would remember your contributions in 100 years. You dedicate yourself to a relationship, only to realize that both of you will die and your love story will be forgotten by history. You commit to a cause, only to realize that the problems you're trying to solve have existed for millennia and will likely exist for millennia more. You pursue personal growth only to realize that all your self-improvement will end when your brain stops functioning. Every meaning you create is temporary, local, and ultimately insignificant in the larger context of space and time. This isn't pessimism. It's just accurate observation about the nature of finite existence in an infinite cosmos. The absurd isn't that life is meaningless. It's that you need meaning while existing in a reality that provides no inherent meaning. You're like someone desperately thirsty in a desert, but the desert doesn't care about your thirst and will never provide the water you need to quench it. Most people respond to this recognition by either denying it through religious or ideological belief systems that promise ultimate meaning, or being crushed by it through depression, anxiety, or nihilistic despair. But Camus proposed a third option that most people never consider: accepting the absurd condition without being destroyed by it, embracing the meaninglessness without falling into despair, living fully despite recognizing that life is ultimately pointless. This requires a fundamental shift in how you think about meaning and purpose. Instead of looking for meaning that exists independently of your choices, you start creating meaning through your choices while accepting that this meaning is temporary and constructed rather than eternal and discovered. You stop asking, "What's the point of life?" and start asking, "What points am I going to create in my life?" You stop seeking ultimate purpose and start choosing immediate purposes that serve your authentic values and genuine interests. The absurd condition doesn't disappear when you accept it. You remain a meaning-seeking creature in a meaningless universe. But the acceptance transforms your relationship with that condition from something that torments you into something that liberates you. When you're no longer desperately seeking meaning that doesn't exist, you become free to create meaning that does exist, temporarily, locally, and authentically, but meaningfully enough to make life worth living despite its ultimate meaninglessness. Part 3. The suicide question that reveals everything. Here's where Camus gets uncomfortably direct. Once you recognize that life has no inherent meaning, the most logical question becomes, why continue living? And your answer to that question determines whether you've truly understood the absurd or just fallen into nihilistic despair. Camus wasn't being morbid or encouraging self-harm. He was pointing out that if life is ultimately meaningless, then suicide becomes a philosophically reasonable option. The fact that most people don't choose suicide despite recognizing life's meaninglessness reveals something important about human nature and the possibilities for authentic living. Think about why you continue living despite knowing that your existence is cosmically insignificant. Is it because you're afraid of death? Because you have obligations to others? Because you hope to discover meaning you haven't found yet? Or is it because something in you rebels against the meaninglessness and insists on living anyway? If you're living out of fear, obligation, or false hope, you're not really engaging with the absurd. You're avoiding it through psychological defense mechanisms that keep you from fully confronting your situation. But if you're living because something in you refuses to be defeated by meaninglessness, even while fully acknowledging that meaninglessness, then you're beginning to understand what Camus called the absurd hero. The absurd hero doesn't live because life has meaning. They live because they choose to live despite life's lack of meaning. They don't find reasons to continue existing. They decide to continue existing without needing cosmic justification for that decision. This is a profoundly different orientation toward life than most people maintain. Instead of living because life matters, you live because you choose to live. Instead of existing because existence serves some higher purpose, you exist because existence is what you're doing right now, and you're going to do it fully and authentically. The suicide question reveals that continuing to live despite recognizing meaninglessness is itself a form of rebellion against the absurd condition. You're not accepting defeat. You're insisting on your right to create temporary local meaning even in a universe that provides no eternal, universal meaning. This choice to live without cosmic justification is what separates genuine acceptance of the absurd from nihilistic despair. The nihilist says, life is meaningless, so nothing matters. The absurd hero says, life is meaningless, so I get to decide what matters. The difference between these responses isn't intellectual, it's existential. It's not about what you think about meaninglessness. It's about how you choose to live with meaninglessness once you've recognized it clearly. Camus argued that this choice to live fully despite philosophical meaninglessness is the most authentically human response possible. You're not denying reality or creating false consolations. You're asserting your freedom to live according to your own values, even when those values can't be justified by reference to cosmic purpose. The suicide question isn't really about whether to kill yourself. It's about whether to kill the part of yourself that demands ultimate meaning, so you can start living authentically within the constraints of the absurd condition. Part 4. The Sisyphus Solution: Why Meaningless Struggle Can Be Beautiful. Here's Camus' most famous insight. The key to living with absurdity isn't finding meaning despite meaninglessness. It's learning to love the struggle itself, even when that struggle accomplishes nothing permanent. He used the myth of Sisyphus to illustrate this possibility. Sisyphus was condemned by the gods to push a boulder up a mountain for eternity. Every time he reached the top, the boulder would roll back down and he'd have to start over, forever. This is obviously a punishment designed to be torturous, endless, pointless effort with no possibility of achievement or progress. Most people would see Sisyphus as the ultimate symbol of meaningless suffering. But Camus proposed something radical. We must imagine Sisyphus happy. Not happy because his task has hidden meaning, not happy because he's earning redemption through his suffering, not happy because he's deluded about his situation. Happy because he has chosen to embrace the task fully, to find satisfaction in the struggle itself, rather than in the impossible goal of permanent achievement. Think about your own life in these terms. You wake up every day, work on projects that will eventually be forgotten, maintain relationships that will end, pursue goals that won't provide lasting satisfaction, and engage in activities that won't create permanent meaning. From the Sisyphean perspective, you're pushing your own boulder up your own mountain, knowing it will roll back down, knowing you'll have to start again tomorrow, knowing the cycle will continue until you die. Most people find this recognition depressing because they're still looking for their boulder to stay at the top of the mountain. They want their achievements to be permanent, their relationships to be eternal, their contributions to be lasting. But what if you embraced the rolling back of the boulder as part of the beauty rather than the tragedy? What if you found satisfaction in the pushing itself rather than in keeping the boulder at the summit? This requires a fundamental shift in how you evaluate your activities. Instead of judging them by their permanent outcomes, you judge them by the quality of engagement they provide while you're doing them. The work that's meaningful while you're doing it, regardless of whether anyone remembers it. The relationships that are fulfilling while you're in them, regardless of whether they last forever. The creative projects that satisfy you while you're creating them, regardless of whether they achieve recognition or influence. The Sisyphean approach doesn't eliminate the absurd condition. Your boulder still rolls back down the mountain. But it transforms your relationship with that condition from resentment to acceptance, from despair to engagement, from meaninglessness to self-chosen purpose. You stop waiting for your struggles to be validated by external meaning and start finding intrinsic value in the struggle itself. You become, in Camus' words, stronger than your rock. Not because you can keep it at the top of the mountain, but because you can push it with dignity, effort, and even joy regardless of where it ends up. This is the absurd hero's solution: full engagement with life despite recognizing life's ultimate meaninglessness. You don't need cosmic justification for your efforts. Your efforts justify themselves through the quality of attention and care you bring to them. Part 5. The revolt against meaninglessness without creating false meaning. Here's where Camus gets revolutionary. The proper response to recognizing life's meaninglessness isn't acceptance or resignation, it's revolt. Not violent revolution, but existential rebellion against the absurd condition itself. This revolt takes a specific form. You refuse to be defeated by meaninglessness, but you also refuse to create false meanings that deny meaninglessness. You live fully and authentically while maintaining clear-eyed recognition of your cosmic insignificance. Most people handle existential meaninglessness through one of two strategies. They either fall into despair and give up on living authentically, or they create belief systems that provide illusions of ultimate meaning. The despairing person says, "Life is meaningless, so why bother trying to live well?" The deluded person says, "Life must have hidden meaning that I haven't discovered yet, so I'll keep searching for the secret that makes everything make sense." But the absurd rebel says, "Life is meaningless, and I'm going to live it beautifully anyway." They don't deny the meaninglessness, but they don't let the meaninglessness defeat them either. This revolt manifests in several ways. You refuse to be paralyzed by purposelessness. Even though your activities don't serve ultimate purposes, you engage in them with full attention and genuine care. You work well despite knowing your work won't be remembered. You love deeply despite knowing all relationships are temporary. You refuse to create false consolations. You don't pretend that everything happens for a reason, that there's a grand plan, or that your struggles serve some higher purpose. You accept randomness, injustice, and cosmic indifference without trying to explain them away. You refuse to live as if meaninglessness eliminates the possibility of values. Even though your values aren't cosmically justified, you live according to them anyway. You treat people well not because the universe demands it, but because treating people well is consistent with who you choose to be. You refuse to let awareness of death prevent engagement with life. You know that everything you create will be destroyed, everyone you love will die, and all human achievements will be forgotten. But you create, love, and achieve anyway, finding satisfaction in the process rather than permanence of the outcomes. This revolt isn't about changing the absurd condition. You can't make life inherently meaningful through willpower or philosophy. It's about refusing to let the absurd condition diminish your capacity for authentic living. The revolt is fundamentally about freedom. When you stop looking for external justification for your choices, you become radically free to make choices based on your authentic preferences rather than cosmic mandates. You don't need the universe to care about justice to choose to act justly. You don't need relationships to be eternal to choose to love deeply. You don't need your work to be cosmically significant to choose to work with excellence and integrity. The absence of inherent meaning becomes the foundation for self-created meaning. The lack of cosmic purpose becomes the space for personal purpose. The indifference of the universe becomes the context for human care and attention. This is the absurd rebel's ultimate realization. Meaninglessness doesn't eliminate the possibility of a meaningful life. It makes such a life possible by removing external constraints on how you choose to live. Part 6. The freedom that comes from accepting pointlessness. Here's something that sounds paradoxical, but becomes liberating once you understand it. Recognizing that life is ultimately pointless doesn't trap you in nihilistic despair. It frees you from the psychological burden of having to justify your existence to cosmic authorities that don't exist. When you truly accept that there's no inherent meaning to discover, no ultimate purpose to fulfill, and no cosmic significance to achieve, you stop wasting energy looking for external validation of your life choices and start making choices based on what actually matters to you personally. Think about how much mental energy you've spent trying to figure out what you're supposed to do with your life. Career counseling, personality tests, spiritual seeking, self-help books, therapy sessions focused on finding your true calling. All of this effort based on the assumption that there's a correct way to live that you need to discover. But what if there is no correct way to live? What if the absence of cosmic guidance means you get to choose your own way without needing to justify that choice to anyone or anything beyond yourself? This is profoundly liberating once you stop trying to fight it. You don't need to find your life purpose. You can create purposes that serve your authentic interests and values. You don't need to discover the meaning of life. You can invent meanings that make your particular life worth living. The freedom that comes from accepting pointlessness isn't the freedom to do whatever you want without consequences. It's the freedom to choose what you want based on your genuine preferences rather than imagined cosmic requirements. You can pursue work that engages your capabilities without needing that work to save the world or serve eternal purposes. You can form relationships that provide connection and growth without needing those relationships to be cosmically destined or divinely ordained. You can create art, help people, learn skills, travel, build things, or do absolutely nothing, not because any of these activities are inherently more meaningful than others, but because they align with who you choose to be during your temporary existence. This freedom extends to how you handle suffering and difficulty. When bad things happen, you don't need to find lessons, hidden blessings, or spiritual growth opportunities. Sometimes bad things are just bad, and your job is to handle them with as much dignity and skill as you can manage, not to extract meaning from meaningless pain. Similarly, when good things happen, you don't need to feel guilty about enjoying them or worry about whether you deserve them. Good experiences are just good, and your job is to appreciate them fully while they're happening, not to justify them through reference to cosmic fairness. The acceptance of pointlessness eliminates the psychological pressure to live up to external standards of significance, success, or spiritual development. You can live according to your own standards, pursue your own interests, and create your own version of a life worth living. This doesn't make you selfish or amoral. You can choose to care about others, contribute to causes, and act ethically. But you make these choices because they align with your values, not because they're required by universal moral laws or cosmic purposes. The ultimate freedom of accepting pointlessness is the freedom to be genuinely yourself without apology, cosmic justification, or external validation. You exist, you're conscious, and you get to decide what to do with that existence and consciousness for the brief time you have them. Part 7. Living fully in an absurd world. After all this exploration of meaninglessness, cosmic indifference, and existential absurdity, you're probably wondering, so how do I actually live with this understanding? How do I function day to day while maintaining awareness of life's ultimate pointlessness? Camus's answer is both simple and profound. You live more fully, not less fully, once you stop waiting for cosmic permission to engage authentically with your temporary existence. First, embrace what Camus called lucid indifference to ultimate outcomes while maintaining passionate engagement with immediate experiences. You can care deeply about your work, relationships, and activities while accepting that none of them will last forever or achieve cosmic significance. This isn't emotional numbness or detachment. It's the capacity to be fully present without being attached to permanent results. You love knowing that love is temporary. You create knowing that creation is impermanent. You strive knowing that achievements are finite. Second, develop what he called intelligent hope. Hope that's based on authentic possibilities rather than illusions about ultimate meaning. You can hope for good outcomes, meaningful connections, and satisfying experiences without needing to believe that these hopes are cosmically guaranteed or spiritually destined. Hope becomes more honest and more sustainable when it's not burdened with metaphysical weight. You hope for what you genuinely want while accepting that you might not get it. Third, practice conscious freedom, making choices based on your authentic values while accepting full responsibility for those choices without external justification. Since there's no cosmic authority dictating how you should live, you're radically free to choose how you want to live. This freedom is terrifying because it eliminates excuses, but it's also liberating because it eliminates external constraints on your authentic self-expression. Fourth, cultivate absurd joy, the capacity to find satisfaction and even happiness in activities that serve no ultimate purpose. You can enjoy your work without needing it to be your calling. You can appreciate beauty without needing it to be eternal. You can love people without needing love to be cosmically meaningful. Joy doesn't require justification any more than suffering requires explanation. Both are just experiences that happen during consciousness, and you can choose to engage fully with the experiences you find valuable. Fifth, maintain what Camus called creative revolt, the ongoing refusal to be defeated by absurdity, coupled with ongoing engagement in meaningful activity despite absurdity. You don't solve the absurd condition, but you don't surrender to it either. You keep creating, connecting, and contributing, not because these activities serve ultimate purposes, but because they express your authentic nature as a conscious being who chooses engagement over withdrawal. Finally, remember that accepting absurdity isn't a one-time philosophical conclusion. It's an ongoing practice of living authentically without external validation. You'll regularly feel the pull to seek ultimate meaning, cosmic purpose, or external justification for your choices. The practice is returning to the recognition that you don't need these things to live well, that their absence creates space for authentic choice, and that meaninglessness is the foundation for self-created meaning rather than the enemy of meaningful life. If this exploration of absurdism has changed how you see your existential situation, remember that seeing clearly is always better than seeing through comforting illusions, even when clarity is initially disturbing. You're not depressed because you see life's meaninglessness. You're awake. And being awake to the absurd condition is the first step toward living authentically within that condition rather than being paralyzed by it. Next week, we'll explore our final topic in this series, bringing together insights from all the philosophers and psychologists we've covered to create a practical framework for living authentically in a complex world. Subscribe now for the culmination of this journey through the most important ideas about human psychology and authentic living. Your journey toward absurd heroism is just beginning, and Camus's insights are your guide to living fully despite cosmic meaninglessness. Because meaning was never cosmic to begin with.